Licensed by Sega and developed by MegaPixel Studio, the remake of 1995's Panzer Dragoon is here. Currently exclusive to the Nintendo Switch, but on its way to other platforms at an unspecified date. For this video, a review copy was provided generously by the game's publisher, Forever Entertainment, who I'd like to thank for letting smaller channels like mine try the game out. This new rendition of the game sets out to add a new coat of paint to the original Sega Saturn release for a modern audience, so how well does it accomplish that task after its first major patch? Well, I'll say up front that I have mixed views on this game, and I'll do my best to express myself clearly here. So from looking at my channel, you can probably tell I'm pretty into Sega's games, but Panzer Dragoon as a series is mostly locked to the Saturn, a system I don't own, so this was my first proper exposure to it, and while I'm mostly approaching it as a newcomer, I did play through Panzer Dragoon Orta, and subsequently its unlockable port of the original game, to help supplement my assessment here. I suppose the proper place to start with looking at a straight remake such as this is the visual experience on offer. For the most part, I really like what the game has achieved, but I think some parts of the experience are let down by technical shortcomings and a lack of readability due to certain environments. But to get into that, I want to explain what the game is first for those who are unaware of what we're looking at here, to help reinforce my issues with the game in this department. Panzer Dragoon and its remake are on-rails shooting games taking place in a 3D environment. What this means is that while you can move your character up, down, left, right, and diagonally in between, you are locked to a certain rectangle of movement and will always travel along the same path through the game's 7 stages, or episodes as they're referred to. Your goal is to move the on-screen cursor to enemies and shoot them down, either by continually pressing the firing button, or to hold it down and trace over enemies, releasing the button to fire off homing shots on the targeted enemies. You can look around your character as you do, with the left and right shoulder buttons letting you look in 90-degree intervals around you for enemies who attempt to flank you and approach from behind. Helping you to understand this is a graphic in the top right showing your cone of vision and dots representing your enemies and their position relative to you. Simply put, this is a short 90s arcade-like experience, roughly an hour long, meant to be played over and over to master its levels and to enjoy the atmosphere it offers. So to circle back to my issues, the first are some technical shortcomings that don't make the experience bad, but they do stand out. At times the frame rate can dip a bit, almost reliably during one particular in-game cinematic, which feels a bit egregious. There's also very odd pop-in, particularly in the game's first stage, which is very difficult to not be a bit distracted by. Due to the nature of the gameplay, you're constantly scanning the environment for enemies, so having a portion of the stage background pop in can be a bit distracting when you're trying to keep an eye out for enemies. This ties into my larger issue here of enemy readability. Stage 1 here is another great example. For purists, the added detail the remake offers here may affect the overall vibe of the stage, taking it from feeling like a long sunken city in the ocean to a somewhat flooded mountain range somewhere. I don't mind the environment change and find it more interesting as a newcomer, but can totally understand the other viewpoint. Where this comes into play is that the added detail and variety of colors the additional architecture entails, combined with the enemies blending in a bit with the setting, makes it feel a bit less fair when trying to dutifully dispatch the game's enemies. This is one advantage the original has, as it's almost impossible to miss an enemy against the vast blue ocean. Now, in these cases, I could in theory rely more on the provided radar in the top right corner, but the yellow dots signifying enemies also blends in with the stage's color palette at times, meaning I have to squint a bit more than I'd like to try to discern if I'm in danger. This is really only an issue here in episode 1, and enemy readability is actually mostly fine aside from that episode, and this forest-centric stage in episode 5. The greens, yellow-greens, and shadows from the trees don't come together to form a very pleasing aesthetic, and oncoming enemies are just too in line with the color palette, I find. But I don't mean to be negative about the entire thing, as I do think the game still looks nice. In particular, episodes 4 and 6 do a really great job of either catching the vibe of the original stage, or enhancing the atmosphere and vibe in a way that I actually prefer. Episode 6 is probably my favorite looking stage in the entire package actually. Also included is a pleasant photo mode. I don't personally get a lot out of using these, but I'm always happy to see other people put photo modes to great use, so I'm happy it's here. Overall, I'm mostly positive about the new graphics, but it can be a mixed bag at times. Which aptly sums up my feelings about the remake as a whole, actually. The other thing I'll touch on here before talking about the gameplay is the game's rearranged soundtrack included with the first patch, handled by Panzer Dragoon Saga and Orta's composer. I think those two games have fantastic scores, so I was very interested in her take on the original's different music styling. I won't butcher her name here with a mispronunciation, but it's actually really cool to hear her bring this soundtrack more in line with the other entries. I think some parts of her rearrangement lack the punch of the original. And I know comparing an orchestral track to a synthesizer track isn't fully fair, but it is the quickest way to showcase what I mean. I do find myself preferring the old score, but I'm glad we have this new interpretation. Either way, selecting each soundtrack is just a few presses away in the pause menu, and for a game meant to be played over and over like this, I do appreciate having a way to mix it up a bit on repeat playthroughs. So on to the part I'm most conflicted on. The actual gameplay. I had fun with Panzer Dragoon Remake even before its first patch. The exciting design of the original still shines through here and let me as a new player in 2020 enjoy myself. I played on easy at first and immediately wanted to play the game on normal and improve my skill at the game to get better at it. And the game's patch adjusted damage output and enemy health to more closely match the original game, alongside other small adjustments which improved this title further in my opinion. Hard mode lived up to its name and felt a little unfair at times, but I pushed through and felt fantastic when I cleared it and unlocked the cheat codes. So on paper, Panzer Dragoon Remake was a success for me. It's fun, it's memorable, and I want to play it over and over. But it also feels weird to play for a few important reasons, which was highlighted further when I went back to try other titles in the series. Panzer Dragoon Orta is an incredible game from 2002 that I loved basically every minute of when I played it recently, and I don't aim to compare the mechanics, since Orta's richer gameplay variety was a byproduct of it being the latest entry in the series at its time, but I can't deny that it simply just feels better to fly around the screen in that game. Locking on enemies felt more trustworthy as well. Even comparing Panzer Dragoon's original entry to its remake, I felt my lock-ons and movement were more reliable and gratifying in that original version. To me, this is disappointing and perhaps the biggest fumble of this remake. I couldn't shake my displeasure with those elements of gameplay on my first playthrough before I'd experienced the older titles, and those qualms persisted in the back of my mind on each subsequent playthrough. I don't believe it's outright bad, and it's all certainly manageable, but the issues I've mentioned throughout this video add up to an experience that I feel should have been better. Panzer Dragoon is a legendary cult classic series, and I feel its return should look and feel more triumphant than it does here. As we've seen with that patch, the developers are intensely listening to player feedback and making fine adjustments. A patch addressing control issues is slated to be coming, and I'll probably make a follow-up video after that patch, or one after it, to see how things are shaping up. I have no doubt in my mind that the folks developing this game love the series and set out to modernize it with their own styling while keeping faithful to the original vision. The credits, in addition to having one of the most adorable moments I've seen in any credits for a long time, have a lot of members of the original team credited, so I'm sure they consulted them while making this. I trust them to get this game to where it needs to be, but right here in this moment, it falls a little short, and I can't help but wonder why the game was launched in this state when this was feedback they'd been receiving since last summer. So as you've seen, I'm left conflicted on Panzer Dragoon Remake. It's certainly a good game, one that I enjoyed and continue wanting to get better at. With time and additional patchwork, it may even become a great remake I feel much more confident in. I certainly hope it does. This same studio will also be developing a remake of the sequel, Panzer Dragoon 2, so getting these issues ironed out now will help that remake a lot more when its time comes. I just can't help but wish the necessary work could have been done before release to result in a better gameplay experience out of the gate for this title. But alas, it is what it is, and for now, this is what we have. If you've played the remake already, let me know down below how you felt about it, and whether you were a newcomer to it or a fan of the original game. I'm curious for other perspectives on it. And after that, if you enjoyed the way I talk, consider checking out my playlist of Sega Ages Switch reviews. The link will be down below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and thank you to my patrons for their generosity in these scary times, particularly to Buckles Chuck Low, Capricornus, The Legend of Groose, Potate Jello, Goldstorm07, Patrick Thompson, Jeet, Calico Plus, and The Crazy Even.